If you visited the Manila International Auto Show a couple of months back, this crossover might have caught your attention. Now this is the GAC Emkoo and it competes in a very competitive and very price-sensitive market. So, is it any good? Let's find out together, shall we? Out on the road, the GAC Emkoo is, well, surprisingly sporty. That's how I would describe this. It's got about 174, 177 horsepower, and more impressively, about 250 Newton meters of torque. In some ways, it's similar to a certain Honda product, the Civic RS or the Civic. Although this is heavier, considerably heavier than your typical compact sedan. It's almost 1,600 kilograms. However, because the power picks up from down low, you get a good amount of shove from lower down the revs, and this car accelerates, well, effortlessly. In terms of ride though, well, it is a touch on the firm side. It's not choppy or it's not uncomfortable. However, the moment you start hitting rougher roads at lower speeds, that's when this crossover sort of sporting nature comes around. Some of your passengers might find it a touch on the hard side, but all in all, it's supple. Now, I have to touch back again on that power because we're driving along Calax here, and this car just gets to 100 kilometers per hour very effortlessly. Like, I just barely touch the accelerator and we're already like doing 95, 96 k's an hour. And I also have to say that it is very refined, very smooth as well. There's not much in the way of wind noise or any of that. So perhaps those head and door handles do help a little bit when it comes to trimming down outside noises. And since we're on the highway, now is also a good time to mention its advanced driver assist systems. Right, so regardless of the variant, whether it's this top-of-the-line GL or the entry-level version, you get adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, and everything in between. Also have to mention that it has autonomous emergency braking. Mind you, it's not entirely sensitive when it comes to detecting obstacles, and in some ways that's okay because some systems are a little too reactive and just throw out the anchors the moment there's a small threat of danger. What's also well calibrated is the car's lane keeping assist system. A couple of months back we tested the GS8 and I almost had the sensation of being ping-ponged from one lane to another. But with this one, the steering wheel tugs are a touch on the gentle side, to a point that you'll almost not notice them. So that's a good thing, and that's a plus when it comes to the setting up of this car's advanced driver assists. So that 1.5 liter turbo is mated to a dual clutch transmission. Out on the highway, it's fine, it's smooth, crisp, quick gear shifts, no issues at all. However, when you start hitting traffic and the stop and go situation, the transmission sometimes is a little too eager to engage, that you're gonna be a little surprised the moment you touch the accelerator. The car just kind of wants to dart forward, and with 176, 177 horsepower, it's really gonna do that, and it has heaps more torque. Mind you, I did have the entry-level Emkoo a couple of weeks back, and for some reason that had even more aggressive shifting, to a point that it was almost difficult to stop smoothly in that thing. You'd think that a 1.5 liter turbocharged engine would be easy on the gas, but so far in my observations, it's sort of been mid-pack. I recorded about 14.2 kilometers per liter out on the highway, and around the city, you're looking at about 8 to 9 kilometers per. Again, because this transmission is a little too eager to put down the power, and it spikes the power from time to time. It doesn't exactly help fuel efficiency here. You can put the car in eco mode to sort of drop the fuel consumption a little bit. Personally, I like the shift patterns in comfort mode. In eco mode, yes, it's still smooth. The transmission's still pretty smooth, but it's a bit on the hesitant side. Of course, you can also put it in sport mode, but that just makes things a little too aggressive for everyday driving, and you might end up giving your passengers a bit of car sickness. Now, I am thankful that the Emkoo comes with pretty large side mirrors because the visibility inside isn't that great for someone my height, and the rear window isn't that big either. Also, you don't get a pair of third windows right at the back. From the outside, it looks like it has extra windows. It actually doesn't. Those are false panels. But again, I'm thankful that this car has loads of cameras, or a 360 view camera in the case of the GL. But I do have to say, when it comes to handling, the Emkoo is really good. Like, for a crossover, it's really good. It's really only let down by the rolling stock tires on this thing. These are on GT Comfort tires. It actually turns in well. And it also helps that it has a multi-link rear suspension. Just helps the car handle that bit better. Just feels more communicative. And speaking of communicative, the steering's not half bad. Okay, it's typical electronic power steering light, but it's not totally devoid of feel. There's still a bit of weightiness left in it. I would again just stick it in comfort mode, but if you want to put it in sport mode, it adds a little bit more weight. And for those folks who want a little bit more feel and feedback, that's sort of the mode to go for. In general, the aesthetic is pretty sporty, although I did notice that the windowsills are pretty high. So I found myself like maneuvering this car, having to sort of peer over from time to time. And if I have to give the RFID card, I sort of have to leap over it. So taller drivers probably won't have a problem, but this is more of a user thing. But if you like cars with big windows and a lot of visibility, then the Emkoo might not be for you. But anyway, moving on. Now the steering wheel, I have to say, looks pretty cool. It sort of reminds me of a couple of older Audi RS models, especially with the flat bottom steering wheel and the thin spokes. Of course, being a GAC, there are screens just about everywhere, and you can change the way it looks just by pressing view on the steering wheel. You got your driving modes, you got your fuel consumption levels, driving history, current driving memory, and tire pressure monitoring system. Now moving here to the center, you've got a pretty big screen, and of course it's your typical infotainment screen, and yes, it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, thank heavens. But my gripe about is this: like the GS8 and a lot of other European brands actually, and other Chinese automakers, is that they put the air conditioning controls right in the screen. Like, yes, you can change the blower speed right from the screen here, but if you want to change temperature, you're gonna have to dig into the menu and etc. Although, moving a little bit further here, now this toggle actually controls the temperature of your climate control system. It's a little far away from the driver though. It all could have been sort of avoided if it was marked and if we had a clearer and sort of more ergonomic control for the air conditioning. As I mentioned, the dashboard has this sporting vibe, so you got this sort of flat top, then you have this flatter fascia, then this curved fascia right by the bottom, and you'll be surprised that everything here is soft touch. Like, this is leather padded, this is soft touch, and even the door cards up here and right in the center. And even the base model has the same material. So for its price, it's actually not bad at all. It gives you the impression that you paid a lot more than the price tag would suggest. Now onto the center console, you have the electromechanical gear selector. Personally, I would have liked the good old Prindle or the PRNDL or the good old gear selector. Of course, you have this phone dock, you've got two cup holders and a little pocket down here. But if you need more storage space, you have to move down here because you got this huge bin. I wouldn't even call this a bin, it's a whole storage space down here. And to find the USB controls, you kind of have to sift underneath here. So you get a USB-A and a USB-C port down here and a 12-volt socket as well. In terms of ergonomics, it's a bit of a mixed bag. And if you want to change some settings in the car, you really have to dig in a lot in the menu here. So for example, I have Apple CarPlay on. I have to actually get out of the Apple CarPlay screen and move the economy drive modes because you won't be able to access that with Apple CarPlay on. Now, thankfully, the settings are saved every time you turn off the car, so you don't have to keep doing the same settings over and over again. You don't have to do the whole pre-flight checklist just to get your preferred settings. At the back of the Emkoo, you have the same high sills right by the windows, and it's right up by my neck already, actually. So for some people, they might find it a bit claustrophobic. Now, thankfully, this top-of-the-line GL model has a panoramic glass roof. You can't actually open this, and it's one whole piece. Now, as for space, well, I am an inch taller than Hollywood comedian Kevin Hart, so I really don't have much complaints. But 6-footers, they might, because this is in my seating position, and you put another 6-footer here in front and another 6-footer here at the back, let's say, they might find themselves brushing the backrests of the seat. You also get a pretty flat floor, so there's no center hump that will force whoever's seated here to lift their legs and put them in an uncomfortable position. So this is a true 5-seater. That's if they're below, let's say, 6 feet, because the headroom, okay, for my height, it's about this much, but for 6-footers, they're gonna end up brushing a bit of the roof. Now, to solve that, you have to get the entry-level model without the glass roof, because this eats up quite a bit of space when it comes to headroom. Other amenities, of course, you have rear AC vents, a must these days, and you get one USB port. Yes, just one. So if you're carrying more passengers with you, tell them to bring a power bank. Now, here, you don't actually get a center armrest, which is odd, actually. So all in all, space here at the back, it's okay. A little bit claustrophobic if you have if you don't have the glass roof open, and if you have the entry-level model, it just feels like you're sunk in deep with a lot of metal inside of you. You also get a map light right up here. Now, in the entry-level model, it's moved to the center, but for this model, obviously, they had to move it someplace else. Oh, and also, these door handles. Yes, these are the door handles, so you just have to pull them open like that, and that's it. However, there are two things I'd like to point out about the cargo area of the Emkoo. While the cargo floor is pretty flat, wide, and generally spacious, loading taller items might become a bit of an issue because of the slope of this pillar. Now, let's say you want to load something this tall, you might end up hitting the rear glass instead when you close the tailgate. So to solve that, you gotta fold these second row seats and slide them in. Secondly, there's no cargo cover despite having a partition right down here. You're supposed to hook it right where these plastic clips are. Now, I do see a partition right here by the end, but I looked around already, but this particular unit doesn't have it. I hope customer units have that feature just for added security. But aside from that, again, cargo floor is pretty good. Now, tailgate is of the power-operated kind, while the base model doesn't have it. Another thing I did notice, though, was this. It's something that's missing. Now, I'm gonna give you a few seconds to figure out which one. Do you see it? Or rather, do you not see it? Now, the Emkoo, regardless of the variant, doesn't have a rear wiper because, well, they really don't have anywhere to put it. So the only solution I could really think of is to drill a hole down here and make it wipe from down here. Now, for some people, that's not going to bother them. I see far too many people not utilizing their rear wipers, but for those who do, it might be a bit bothersome. Onto the design. Now, over at the front, it's very striking, and that's what I've observed so far with Chinese car designs. You either like it or you don't, but you can't deny that they're attention-grabbing. Now, those headlights, for instance, where they're these huge L-shaped units, and the LED light signature on them means you're not going to mistake them for anything else on the road. Now, for the front bumper, it also integrates, well, I wouldn't call it a grille because it's all in the bumper, and there's a small vent there, but that's it. That's the size of your grille per se. Now, this side, there's a lot of sharp angles, sharp lines, defined curves, and etc. And of course, it has these hidden door handles that close when you go at speed and sort of unfurl when you unlock the car. Now, for some people, they don't like them. Some people do. They think it's futuristic. For the people who don't, they prefer the good old pull type door handle. Personally, I'm more of the latter, but it does give it a sort of cleaner look, more streamlined look. And if anything, if you want to flex this car to your friends, well, say it has door handles like a Nissan GTR. Now, as for the rear, I like the fact that they put vertical taillights. It wraps around the quarter panel, and it's very striking when you look at it from the back. Now, the tailgate, again, it's very wide, and if you're not wearing any glasses, you might even mistake it for a Volvo. Now, I do want to say something about these hidden door handles. The funny thing was, every time I left, parking spaces, people were telling me that, why is it sticking out? Like, no, don't worry about it. It's gonna close. But yeah, you're gonna get a lot of questions about these. So yes, you can turn off that function, but you're gonna get a lot of questions if you leave them on. So the Emkoo, is it a good car? Well, okay, let's run it by its pros and cons. So pro is definitely the styling. Like it, hate it, it grabs attention. Secondly would be the performance. This engine definitely ain't no slouch. Sure, it doesn't have the outstanding fuel economy or any of that, but you know what? 14 kilometers per liter on the highway, still not bad at all. Then there's the handling and the dynamics of the car, and definitely that rear multi-link suspension helps a lot. It just needs better tires. And lastly is the value proposition of the Emkoo. You know what? For everything it has, it costs 1,498,000 pesos, just a hair under 1.5 M, and you get all the safety tech, all this style, this kind of performance, and this kind of dynamics. And of course, I'm gonna also add this. It even has a rear seat belt reminder, just to put the cherry on top there. And if you want to save even more money, the entry-level model is about 200,000-300,000 less. It has most of the features found in this car. You just don't get the sunroof and the upgraded audio system. You also get smaller wheels, but you know what? Both variants of the Emkoo are really solid value propositions. Now for the cons, well, okay, I'm going to start things off with the transmission. There are good dual clutch transmissions out there. This isn't exactly the best of the rest, and it sort of struggles in traffic. Secondly would be the visibility. Now again, for the sake of style perhaps, you don't get much visibility looking outwards, so it's going to be a little more difficult to maneuver the car, and the 360 cameras and whatnot, they're only exclusive for this top-spec variant. But lastly would be the ergonomics. Now, there's a lot of digging through the sub-menus and just scrolling around a lot on the screen, and I don't know, I would prefer physical buttons, especially when it comes to drive modes and, the radio and all that. But, those aside, I still think that the Emkoo is a good car as a whole. All things considered, I would actually recommend one of these, especially for those looking for a stylish, smallish crossover. And for what it's worth, I would give it 8 out of 10. And really, the only reason why I had to knock down points is because of that transmission and the interior ergonomics. Otherwise, consider one of these.